Hello, hello, welcome back on our fun Monday. Honestly, this is why I do these more lower key casual videos on Mondays because I ultimately do not like going in on a Monday and really starting my work week in super intense. My previous job, they made everybody just jump in on Mondays, and it's intense, full of stress, and if I'm going to create my own work schedule and work environment, I'm going to have a nice, relaxed Monday. So, happy Monday. But today I did want to talk about why I left Parelli and ultimately why I left natural horsemanship. So, roll the time clock back a little bit, back to the early 2000s. I got my first horse in 2004. I bought her myself as a 16-year-old and earned my way through keeping her as well. So, none of this was funded by my parents at the time. But she was a very difficult horse. And traditional dominance-based training where you hit the horse if they do something wrong and yell at them and all of that did not work. She put people in the hospital when people tried that on her, and she was very fearful and very scared. And she had a very strong fight response. And I just loved her, and I had this kind of sick feeling in my stomach whenever the people around me were advising me to just hit her upside the head or something, get after her because she's being bad, she's planning on being bad to you. It just didn't seem right to me as a 16-year-old to do that, even though I had been trained for 6 years to basically do that. Although as a rider, riding other horses, I developed better riding skills where I didn't have to hit the horse with the whip. I mean, I started as a hunter jumper, so during the jumping, I would get on these horses that would require a lot of effort to get moving, but I learned how to ride in a way that I didn't have to smack the horse a lot. I didn't have to hit the horse with my heels a lot because I didn't like that. It just seemed very jarring to me. So I became a really good hunter jumper, and I became a very good rider. In fact, when I was 14, I was a rider for hire, and I've started the yearlings and 2-year-olds. Now, I mean, in hindsight, I'm like, I would never get on a yearling or 2-year-old in my life now because it's way too young. They're just way too, not structured enough. A lot of their bones are still cartilage. You can damage a lot of growth plates that way, but I didn't have that education at the time. Adults were just saying, okay, you're light, get on, and we're going to train this horse. So I was kind of like the crash test dummy for a few years. But yeah, so I got her. It didn't feel right. And the fact that she got extremely violent when you got violent with her was another telltale sign that that kind of training didn't work for her. And so the only thing that I had at the time, the only resources I had that were not that type of traditional training was John Lyons. And he didn't have a quote course. He just had a few books, and then you had to kind of go to him and go to his clinics. And I didn't have the money for that as a 16-year-old to go out west and, work with John Lyons. So I didn't get enough information from him. Monty Roberts wasn't really a thing, super popular at the time. Popular as in I couldn't find books and all of that. And the internet was still pretty fresh. You couldn't, Amazon was still just a book selling company, and, it was just really hard to find resources. I managed to stumble upon Pat Parelli, and at the time that I got his system, it was actually when he was just migrating from cassette tape to DVD. So I would have gotten all 3 levels, but I only got the first one because I wanted to try it out. And at the time, it was the only level that was on DVD because I'm like, everything's migrating to DVD. I'm not going to have a cassette player all the time. So I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for it to get to DVD. So level 1 was the only one that was on DVD. So I got that. I got some of the stuff, the equipment to use. And I was very proud of that. So natural horsemanship was basically like very new at the time. And it was appealing to me because it was a kinder approach than, smack the horse kind of method. So I got really good at it. So I was at level 1. I brought Delilah through level 1. And it was very beneficial for her. She seemed to really respond well to that. It didn't seem, none of the things that were introduced seemed to bother me much. I mean, there was a lot of, herd leader kind of training or like mindset involved, but that seems to click with me because from what was being, put out, it was, the herd leader, alpha male, or, stallion and all of that. So it kind of seemed to make sense because I didn't have much of a other base of, information. And there wasn't, like I said, the internet was somewhat new-ish, and there wasn't a whole lot of information posted online. And a lot of websites were just extremely basic text-based websites, if anyone remembers. I'm aging myself. But, yeah, it was just really hard. I had to go to the library to figure it out. But, and I think I didn't see it online. I think I saw Parelli in a magazine because I got, back in the day when there was mail order catalogs. There was this one that was like, it had all of the obscure horseback riding stuff, like weird things here and there that were new and kind of unproven. And I forget what it was called, but like, I think that's where I found it. And then they had a website, so that's where I went. And I became part of the Savvy Club. Like, I was like sold out Pat Parelli. I wanted to become a Parelli trainer. And at the time, it was like too expensive to trailer my horse down to his ranch, which was very new. And like at the time, you'd had to pay like $750 for tuition plus board for your horse, plus all of this stuff. And, right now, $750 doesn't seem that expensive. But to then, I think it was 17 when I started this, 17-year-old kid that made $50 a week, that was expensive. So I couldn't do it. Plus, my parents didn't want me to go anywhere that was not there. So I just figured it out. But I then got the second level, I think a year later, because that had gone to DVD. And I think I watched to see if third level would go to DVD for a couple of years, and it didn't. So that was kind of during the time I lost interest with it as well. But I went through level 2. I think it took me like 18 months because there was a lot of like behavioral things that we were getting through and all of that. But yeah, I mean, I was riding around in a rope halter and all of that. I didn't really see any problem with any of it. And, everything seemed to be going just fine. And I kept a really good opinion of Parelli for a really long time, honestly, until somewhat recently, in the past 4 years. But I moved on I had a classical dressage education opportunity that I really jumped on. And that was with my riding master, who became my riding master, up in Canada. And I don't mention his name because I respect his privacy. That is why. If you know me, you know who it is. But I'm not trying to be dishonest with anybody, but I respect the privacy of this person. So I had that opportunity. That's when I was teaching Delilah classical dressage. I was starting to understand some of the dressage lateral works and how they benefit, but it was still at a very low level. And so I learned the movements, I learned the theory of training, I learned how to train a young horse up to it, and I trained Delilah as much as she could physically do. when she lost sight in her one eye, she just did not, she wasn't the same when it came to canter leads going that direction. And I could understand, being half blind and losing your depth perception, that lead that you weren't really strongest on, and now you can't see where you're going. I didn't know how to work through that at the time either, because it was very, I had worked with half blind horses before, but I just didn't really have a great basis of training for half blind horses. But, moving on, I studied equine anatomy and equine sciences more and more, and I don't know, the things just started to click more and make sense more, and I started to understand what a thoracic sling was, because that I never got educated in that. I went through, even in Canada, they touched on it, but they didn't really get into the science of it, and they didn't really explain exactly what it was. So I started to understand a lot of those things in biomechanics and kinesiologies and all of that. And then when Delilah passed away, and I moved on to helping the horse rescue, I started to see a few things, because I had the opportunity to work through training of a lot of different horses, just initial evaluations and initial training before they got adopted out. And I got to kind of study it a little bit better. And at that time, I considered Parelli one thing, natural horsemanship one thing. You use that as the basis of operations. You get the horse to a good standard, and then you moved on to whatever it was. I didn't see everything as symbiotic as I do now. I just saw, these are all of the different sports that you can go, all these different directions, but you want to have your foundation in this natural horsemanship thing and then shoot off from there. I didn't see everything as together and symbiotic as I do now. But it wasn't until this one horse that was really abused, psychologically abused. I was trying to work with her, and I was using the Parelli method, and I was using the thing that, they said, oh, this is really safe, and, this is what you do to bring the horse's head around so that they don't buck you off and all of that. And she knew how to brace against that, and I was trying to bring her head around, and she was going into a bucking fit, and I flew off. It was awful. I hadn't been bucked off in years and years and years, but it's got me thinking. About am I trusting this method too much? Am I blindly going through this method? And because there wasn't much preparation before we got on. It was the 7 games, and then you're good at the 7 games, you can perform it, so get on. And it suddenly, all of a sudden, didn't feel very safe to me. And I was going back to my classical training where my master was like, you need to get all of this other stuff together before you even get on. And I wasn't really listening at the time, because I'm like, oh, this is Parelli, I do the Parelli thing, and then I do his thing. And then I started, it started coming together. And then I found the Bent Branderup books, because in 2018, this was 2019 that this was happening, but his first book had just come out a year prior. And I'm like, I've been following him kind of on YouTube with his YouTube question and answer things for, since 2014. So it was I've already been kind of following him for 5 years already. Let me read this book. And he had the same kind of philosophy as my riding master, except it was more articulated. And so I could understand it a little bit better because it was a little more articulate. So he articulated this way of doing things and way of evaluating horses and way of preparing them for things before you do it, and a way of reading the horse better. And I started being able to read the horses better. And my final straw with natural horsemanship was when people that I knew started sending their horses to, quote, natural horsemanship trainers. And I saw videos of people just chasing these horses around with flags and all of that. And it's like, okay, natural horsemanship, flag, carrot stick, hind end disengagement. There's a lot of problems, and I didn't like them. So I just, the very, very last straw was I was doing the yo-yo game. And then, if you know Parelli, the yo-yo game is you wiggle the rope a little bit, and then you intensify and intensify and intensify until you take the snap, which is heavy, and you just loop around the rope until you literally hit the horse in the face. And for some reason, I didn't see that as a problem until I was actually teaching this one younger rider how to train these horses at the rescue. And I noticed that the yo-yo game wasn't working on this one horse because the horse just wasn't figuring it out. Because, like, part of natural horsemanship is you do a thing, the horse has to freak out a little bit, and then they figure it out, and then they calm down. But what I didn't know is that you were basically pushing the horse into learned hopelessness and thinking that they couldn't do anything else because you're trapping them. You trapped them for liberty stuff. You trapped them in the round pen. You couldn't do it without a round pen. At least the way you were taught, you put the foundation in as a round pen, and then they figure out that they can't leave you in the open field. But if you go to the open field before they're ready, then you kind of go way backwards. So I was teaching this younger person, and she was watching me, and I was doing this yo-yo game, and the horse wasn't figuring it out. So I was like literally hitting this horse in the face with a snap. And she looked at me with the same look that I gave this one Western pleasure trainer when I was a little bit older, like when I was 19. Right before I walked away from that particular type of training, because the trainer that I was watching and the adults were telling me that I could learn from, they put this horse in hobbles and struck this horse until it figured out how to move with the hobbles on, which is, the Western pleasure gait that they were looking for. And I just had that disgusted look and I walked away. And then I noticed that this person did the same thing to me. And then I realized I'm that trainer now. Like, I am that trainer that the kids that have the sensitive, standard of morality, they're disgusted with them and they walk away. I'm like, this is not good. I have become that person. So I started to really analyze this natural horsemanship method, and I came up with the things that I don't like about it and the reason that I'm leaving it. Because I don't want to be that trainer. I don't want to be that person that, people just walk away from all disgusted and they're like, this isn't what, it should be. But so the disengagement of the hind end, natural horsemanship people seem to be obsessed with this. Disengage the hind end, disengage the hind end. And it's a tactic to teach the horse learned hopelessness while you're in the saddle. And that's why they call it a safety mechanism, because they're trying to make the horse safe through learned helplessness. And it puts a lot of stress and strain on their muscles and their joints unnecessarily. And it prevents them from using their body properly for impulsion. So now they're strung out. They're not using their hind end properly. They're not engaging. They're not strung out. And then you stick them in a rope halter, and you're stuck in the rope halter for years, because that's what they tell you. You got to perfect everything in a rope halter first. Well, the rope halter is a very non-specific, not clear way of communicating with the horse. It's very kind of floppy and everything. It's fine for like the first few rides if somebody's leading them around like a pony ride, but it's not very good because it's very muddy. Like, it's a very muddy signal. And then you go around with the horse's head down, strung out, not like forward down and engaged, but like strung out, and you've been disengaging the hind end. So now the horse's hind end's strung out. So now you're sitting on their spine And it's not good. And then you've got this quote driving game. And I mean, it's fine for the hind end, but for the front end, the driving game, basically you're threatening to hit the horse in the face with this carrot stick. And you are progressively making them head shy. And on top of that, it doesn't work with blind horses. So like this Parelli method is not a blind horse method, which, you know, is not something that I can really respect, because I do like use, making sure that, every able-bodied horse can do the things they need to do, including blind ones, so that people don't keep thinking, the horse is blind, so therefore they should be put down. And then like some of the final like nail in the coffin was when Pat Parelli was trying to show everybody that he could do dressage too. That Parelli system is good for dressage. And he ripped off the Piaffe. And instead of like actually training this horse at Piaffe, where it's a very collected, very engaging movement, he just took the turn on the forehand and then just combined it, turn on the forehand, turn on the forehand, turn on the forehand, and then just twisted this horse into this Piaffe-like state. And he's like, look, I can do the Piaffe. And I'm like, that's not how you do that. And he just made fun of dressage that way. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I just walked away from that. So now I'm, finding my own way. I'm learning from the Art of Riding. They do a lot of liberty stuff. They do a lot of different things, but they also encourage you to learn your own way within a good framework. And I do like that, and I respect that, because it creates independent learners, something that I hold tight to. And if you're a student of mine, you'll know I make you into an independent learner because you need to know these things for yourself and look at these things for yourself and decide for yourself after looking and considering these training methods what you are going to do with the horse. And that opens yourself up to your own unique like additions to the training methods, things that I wouldn't think of. And I come up with things that other Art of Riding people don't think of. I mean, I'm not an Art of Riding trainer yet, but the path is being walked though. But I don't have much time left, but thank you for watching. And I wanted to put this out, but I wanted to put it out in a thoughtful manner. And I just wanted to let you know, like, yeah, I've had a base of training in natural horsemanship along with my base of training in classical dressage. But that particular thing is not something I practice or desire to practice. I now have to kind of go back and correct some of my bad habits that are associated with this method. But it did get me from point A to point B. It bridged the gap, which I'm thankful for. But it's done. I'm done with it. And I'm going to move on to better methods that have been developed since then, that have been offered and are more accessible since then. So I hope you have a good week, and please be kind to others, and please be kind to your horse.